So it's been 20 years since Jacques and I started the Friends of Public Health, and we created this organization to be a vehicle to advocate for public health at the local level, and it's been a remarkable success, even if I say so myself. This year we have 150 members of the Friends of Public Health. Of course, the Friends of Public Health is not unlike the Roach Motel. You can check in, but you can never check out. And so, not all, I'll be candid, not all of them are dues-paying members, but everyone has paid dues at some point in time. We did have our annual meeting in December. We awarded our Public Health Leadership Award to Bruce Cohen, who is a former town meeting member and chair of our advisory council on public health, and also president of the Friends for a number of years. He retired and moved to Rockport, and we miss him. So we gave him that award. We also gave the Carlin Community Health Award this year to Renee Furman and the Brookline Food Pantry, and I think all of us will agree that the work of the food pantry is just outstanding. Those folks do a wonderful job and deserve it very much. We elected a 12-member board of trustees, a number of whom are in the audience tonight, and co-presidents Cheryl Leffman and Rosalie Hermos. I want to thank them for stepping up to co-chair the Friends of Public Health organization. We also awarded a bunch of mini grants, including one for the Brookline Food Pantry, one for the Zumba Gold program here at the Council on Aging, which is hosting us yet again. And thank you very much to the council and Julie and all the comrades from the Council on Aging. Thank you. And we also awarded a mini grant to Climate Action Brookline to support their work as well. So it's been a good year. It's been a challenging year in some ways, but let's face it, man, the last 3 weeks, the weather has just been dynamite. How can we say anything bad about anything with the weather being what it is? So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce sorry, man, I got to say it. Anybody watch late night television? This guy is on every 5 minutes. DPH has commissioned him to do a public service program, and every time I turn on the TV, he's on there, and I understand he's nominated for a couple of Emmys, but he can tell you all about that. This is Jacques Carter, Dr. Carter, initiator of the Friends of Public Health? Co-founder. I'll concede that.
Thanks a lot, good friend. So, 20 years. I mean, who would have thunk it 20 years ago? 1996, England struggling with mad cow disease, got into the human population. Scotland had a different kind of animal issue with Dolly being cloned. Japanese were killing us with Nintendo 64, and also invented something called the DVD 20 years ago. Gas was $1.22 a gallon. And a few of us here in Brookline thought we would try to have an impact, as Alan said, by starting an organization that could deal with public health issues, social service issues, and human resource issues with the people in this town. And it apparently has been successful because every year this room gets filled. You guys keep coming back, so we must be saying something good. Every year we have, some of the leaders in health policy in the world right here talking, in Brookline. Every year we get great outpouring from the staff at the Friends of Public Health, Cheryl and Rosalie, new members, new leaders. And the other constant is that every year we have just about the best moderator in the world. So it's my pleasure on this 20th anniversary to introduce moderator extraordinaire, all of our friends, the Honorable Michael Dukakis.
First, I bring the greetings and apologies of my dear wife, who usually is here, but who, since the beginning of the year, has had serious dental problems. and made the mistake, don't tell him, of going to an endodontist in Beverly Hills. I said, well, you know, Beverly Hills and orchids in his office, you should have been forewarned. I hate to tell you what I paid in the middle of what was supposed to be her last procedure on some bridges. In the middle of the thing, he said, I can't finish this, you've got to go back right now to your regular dentist. I was out in the waiting room, reading and grading final papers, because I teach at UCLA in wintertime. And we never had an experience like this. In any event, she's been walking around and complaining that she feels if her teeth are going to fall out of her mouth every 5 or 10 minutes. So she's seeing a local endodontist tomorrow, which she hopes will finally resolve these problems. And so do I. And she says to me, now what are those things? And I say, bridges. Think Zakem, bridges. So this is our 20th. And we started this, Alan, where are you? We started this at the Lincoln School, was it? The new Lincoln School. In order to get there from Perry Street, I would walk up Cypress and then up Brington, and then across Route 9. Because I spent the first 6 years of my life at 397 Boylston Street, brick 2 family, 2 down from corner of Clark and Route 9. And I used to kind of remember my youth, including the night just before the great hurricane, 1938. Any of you here remember the hurricane of 38? Can I get those kind of the room? Nobody in this room? Yeah, Dolores was around, but you were in Ohio someplace, weren't you at the time? And I remember walking up that street to get to 397 Boylston as the great hurricane of 38. I also remember going down to the new A&P just up from Cypress and stealing a box of cookies and bringing them home. And my mother taking me by the arm and taking me back down there to return them and apologize to the head of the department, who happened to be a Greek American. That was rough. And I also remember getting haircuts at Rando's Barbershop, where the tuxedo place is. Is it still there? Do we still have a tuxedo place? The corner of Cypress? Okay. And I was about 5 at the time. Remember, this is the Depression. And periodically, the races from Rockingham were always on. And periodically, somebody would come in and give Rando a couple of bucks. And I figured, in those days, a haircut cost $50. I figured they probably had gotten their haircuts for free because they couldn't afford it. They were coming in to pay it. And about 25 years later, I'm walking down the street and said, you guys, you're so dumb. I mean, Rando was a bookie. Years later, David Nine, you remember the great Globe columnist, had a heart attack and died, and I was asked to speak at his memorial service. And I called his younger brother, Chris, and I said, Chris, you know, I remember the family that lived just down the street from us. So tell me a little bit about the family and what's happened. I remember your grandfather who ran that lawnmower sharpening place on Cypress Street, just around the corner, Route 9. And he said, well, he was succeeded by my uncle, Leo. And I said, who ran the lawnmower shop? He said, yeah, that's not all he did. I said, what else did he do? He said he was a bookie. So we had an Italian guy on one side of the street, booking, and an Irish guy on the other side. Which raises the interesting question, where were the Brookline police? And what were they doing? Anyway, a little nostalgia, that's what happens to me. Look, this has been a great, great series, and our thanks to you two guys in particular for putting all of this together. And somehow, Alan comes up with these fantastic panels, and we have another one for you. Heavily dominated by women. You notice that these days? And if I may say, 3 terrific women. Then, of course, there's John. They're all dear friends. We've worked together on this for a long time. Madam Secretary, great to have you back. Thank you for joining us. Amy, our great advocate. John, of course, who's a great legislator. I've got his PhD. He's now teaching Harvard School of Public Health. And last but by no means least, one of my oldest and dearest friends, who was my cabinet coordinator in my first administration. And since that time, a little bit of a break after I got defeated, has been the extraordinarily able head of the State Employees Group Insurance Commission. For whatever reason, folks, has been appointed and reappointed by Republican as well as Democratic governors. Isn't that amazing? And just retired. Still at the top of the game. Welcome, Brookline, my dear. It's good to see you. And I think what I'm going to do is to start, Judy Ann, with you and just ask you guys to take 10 minutes. I think you can probably remain seated. Is that okay? So we don't have people jumping up and down. So we'll hear from each of these folks for about 10 minutes, and then we'll have the best part of the show, which is you guys asking questions, making comments, and taking advantage of this great panel. Just one other story, and that is that just a few years ago, something called the Affordable Care Act was approved by the Supreme Court of the United States, kind of. And we had our meeting the night before the Supreme Court came down with that decision. And there was great speculation. And one of our panelists happened to be a colleague of mine at Northeastern, who teaches health law. And I said, what do you hear? And she said, I think they're going to approve it, but I'm getting funny vibes about the fact that they're going to declare the expansion of Medicaid to be unconstitutional. I said, what's unconstitutional about that? When I was governor, Congress must have expanded Medicaid 8 or 9 or 10 times. Didn't ask our permission, and we had to pay 50% of it. That's what I hear, she said. And that's what the Supreme Court did. About as bad a decision the Supreme Court of the United States has ever made, and it's left millions of Americans who otherwise would be eligible for Medicaid without health care. So maybe we'll hear about that today. Anyway, Madam Secretary, you're on. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Governor. And thank you for inviting me to be here. Yes, that panel before the Supreme Court ruling, we did a lot of speculation. But I want to thank Alan and Jacques for continuing this. 20 years, wow. That's quite a time span. 20 years ago, I was still living in Brookline on Clark Road, and my daughter was still in high school. That's obviously no longer true. But it's great to be back here to see many former neighbors and patients and others. So thank you. You know, I have a list of things that I wanted to talk about tonight. And basically they fall into 3 buckets. Number 1, Massachusetts needs to be proud of what it's done. And even though many people are saying, well, we're celebrating the 10th year anniversary of health reform in Massachusetts, it was Governor Dukakis who started way before 2006. Healthcare, and he is somebody who I always look up to when people say, well, we need to change everything right now. Incrementalism, if that's what you can get, it does work. And it's great that many of the features that he started that weren't necessarily part of our 2006 law made it into ACA as well. So Massachusetts should be very proud of what has happened. But what I want to do in my comments is just talk a little bit about the significance of the 2006 law and why it matters to everyone in the state of Massachusetts, but also look to the future about why we need to keep working on things and the guts that I think it will take for us to really move the system along so that we're actually distracting us from where we need to be. You know, when Massachusetts passed the law in 2006, we had a very high rate of insured population, again, in part thanks to Governor Dukakis. But you might think, well, if we started out with 92 or 93% of the population who was insured, what difference does a little bit of extra that we gain make? Well, about 500,000 people, 500,000 people gained insurance as a result of that reform. And the people who benefited from that were the people who actually were most vulnerable to being ill or not having good health, and who struggled the most to get health care when they needed it. So low-income people, people from racial and ethnic minority groups, clearly saw big changes when the 2006 law came in and made it possible for them to get health insurance. As a result of that, we saw people were getting more preventive care, but also people were discovering that they had things they didn't know about, because for the first time they could go to the doctor for something other than an emergency. So people were going to get tested for HIV or to get screening for colon cancer, which we can treat when it's discovered early. And we did see things like people coming in with earlier diagnosis of those types of things. We also know that there were fewer deaths among those populations of people. And in some of the geographic areas of Massachusetts that have the lowest income, that compared to comparable states with similar populations, the death rates among those people decreased. So when you hear people say, well, having health insurance, you know, is just a card, it doesn't really guarantee you health, tell that to the scores of people who are uninsured and who die unnecessarily because they don't have insurance. We know that it does make a difference. The other type of change I just want to point out is that the Medicaid expansion that we did in Massachusetts, and which many states have decided to take advantage of, meant that for the first time, adults who didn't have kids, who didn't have disabilities, and who were low income could get health insurance. And this, I'm going to point out, was especially important for women, which was the area of health that I was so invested in. Because before this law, the way that you got insurance if you were a woman and you didn't get it through your employer or through your spouse was, if you got pregnant, you could get health insurance. The state made sure about that. Or if you had small kids, you could get insurance. But women who weren't in that condition could not. So too often, whether women could get health care depended on their reproductive status, and that's not the way we should be thinking about women. And obviously, if you can't get health care, you can't get birth control, and you end up with unintended pregnancies. So it was a vicious cycle of bad outcomes. So that's a little bit about what the impact was, but what difference does that make to people who were insured, are relatively well off compared to the types of people that I just described? Well, when we don't have healthy communities and healthy societies and healthy populations, the burden on the rest of us is significant. Impacts our workforce, whether they're healthy, whether they can work at the top of their game, whether our kids are getting a good education. So it matters to everyone. Having this small group of people who might seem more vulnerable and not very close to our particular circumstances is not good for our health. It's the public health message, right, Alan? So it matters to all of us. What do we need to pay attention to going forward? Well, healthcare is still very expensive, both for individuals, for state governments, and for employers. This country cannot continue to spend as much on healthcare as it does. And everyone knows that even though we spend so much, we don't do so well compared to other modern economic countries, economically advanced countries. I see there's a sign out here for single-payer health care, and that could be the solution. But the truth is our healthcare system is built in such a way that it's inefficient, it doesn't promote health as much as it could, and it's upside down in terms of what incentivizes hospitals and doctors and nurses and others. And we need to change that. And there's a lot going on to try to change that. Maybe some of you have heard of things like patient-centered medical homes. And if you are getting your care at a particular health system in the state, you might have gotten a letter saying, we'd like your permission to, or we're notifying you that you're now in an accountable care organization through your Medicare. These are things that are, structurally trying to change the healthcare system, but to me, it's a little bit like tinkering around the edges without fixing the fundamental problems that we need to solve. And I'll leave it up to John to talk about how we should do that. But we need to pay attention to that, because I think pretty soon we're going to start hearing governments say and insurers say, we can't continue to afford to cover these people who have been uninsured. And maybe we don't have to cover this population or this population or this population and go backwards. We can't afford to do that for all the reasons that I just said, but mostly because this is a society where we have the resources to make sure everybody has access to health care, and we have to maintain that commitment. The other thing that I just want to say is that we also have to maintain the commitment to making sure the health system works as well as it can for everyone without bankrupting anyone, whether it's people, families, employers, the government, or whomever. And the only way we can do that is that if we design new systems and fix the structures that contribute to the inefficiency and the high cost of health care, we have to take the dollars that we're saving and be willing to give them to education, transportation, affordable housing, living wages for people who are not making enough to support their families. What else? So it isn't just, if you fix the system, you save a lot of money, and then you can use it to do something fancy in the healthcare system. We have to pay attention more to these other things, which are very important for making sure we can achieve health. And we can't let systems, healthcare providers and hospitals and systems off the hook by saying, oh, well, we have all these other problems, the so-called social determinants of health, low education, polluted air, and all of those other things that are causing ill health, and we can't fix that in the health system. There's plenty of improving to do inside the healthcare system that can improve the health of people in our communities and in our society, and we can't let health systems off the hook for being responsible for that, even though all these other things are important as well. So.
Thank you so much. First of all, I also want to thank Alan and Jacques. Thank you so much for it's also a pleasure to be on a panel with these remarkable panelists who have a history and can talk from the inside about how we got where we are in the last 20 years. I will say that Healthcare for All was 10 years old when Friends of Public Health was formed. So we are a 30-year-old organization. The mission of Healthcare for All is to create a consumer-centered healthcare system that provides affordable, accessible, high-quality, culturally competent care for everyone. And we pay attention to the most vulnerable people among us. And we know that vulnerability comes in a variety of forms and at different times in people's lives. I agree with everything that Secretary Bigby has said, and I think we could spend, hours and hours talking about the remarkable innovations that came in Massachusetts that delivered us to where we are right now. But I would like to pick up from Secretary Bigby's discussion about the health reform in 2006, which became the model for the Affordable Care Act, and reflect on some of the work that's gone on since then and kind of where we are poised to go from here. Because I think we are on the cusp of doing some more remarkable, innovative system delivery reforms in the Commonwealth that will help inform the rest of the country as we go forward. So we have all benefited from the law that was passed under Governor Romney and implemented so well by Governor Patrick that has provided the highest rate of health insurance coverage for the Commonwealth. We have the highest rate of coverage for any jurisdiction in the country, and that is something for which we should be proud. It also means, as Dr. Bigby said, there are people alive in the Commonwealth today who would not otherwise be alive if they were uninsured, and they have those statutes to thank for that. We, in 2012, built on the health reform on Chapter 58 and passed a bill that was specifically looking at the cost and quality of healthcare. Now that almost everyone has coverage, it really is time to dig in and figure out how to make the coverage that we receive more cost effective and to incentivize the healthcare system to keep us healthy, which, when you think about it, is radical and is the polar opposite of what a fee-for-service system provides. Instead of paying for each service and test that's done to us, which means you get what you pay for. So if the incentive is to do more, you'll do more. If the incentive is to look at your overall health, the expectation is that you will do the right number of tests and have the right amount of care in order to be able to keep you healthy. And that really was the fundamental premise of the cost and quality bill that was passed in 2012. Now, I know that, and we talked about last year, the fact that that really means taking some money out of the system, which means you're basically taking someone's lunch. While I would very much like it to be more high quality care that's less expensive for each of us, it also means that the healthcare system loses money. There are winners and losers in that equation, which becomes very difficult. And that's exactly what we've seen. There have been innovations in our insurance packages. There have been innovations in the ways providers are associated with one another. I will also say that the expectation that we are all, certainly at Healthcare for All, we are paying close attention to this new model of care called the Accountable Care Organization. And I am very curious to know if anybody here got a letter from their insurer saying, or their provider saying, you are now a member of an ACO. Have you seen those letters? I'm very interested to know how those sat. If you got very excited about that or you got very worried and wondered, what in the world is that? Done well, we think that those will be a marvelous innovation. Done poorly, we worry that there's a real, that the driver for this reformed delivery system model, with providers talking to one another, with you really being at the center of a healthcare team, we worry that success looks like saving money. Instead of what we as consumer advocates want, success looks like you are healthier and you are able to live your life, age in place, and live a fuller and more robust life because we've really redesigned what we're paying for and what we're valuing in the healthcare system. So there's an awful lot to stay tuned for that. I will say that the Mass Health Program, which is that covers more than 1 million people in the Commonwealth, are Mass Health members, and we're incredibly grateful that we've expanded that program to cover lots of poor and low-income folks in the Commonwealth. the care, the system reforms that are coming are focused on creating these accountable care organizations and inviting Mass Health members to become members of ACOs. The challenge is, and one of the things that gives Healthcare for All heartburn, is that there are real disincentives not to do this. So if you want to continue in a fee-for-service system, to stay out of managed care, there will be fewer services that are paid for. That does not sit well with us at all. ACOs, in theory, will provide better integrated care so that your providers are talking to one another. In our best case scenario, what we very much want to see is that things like behavioral health, which now is so segmented and separated from your overall health, oral health, which again, I would love to have, Governor Dukakis, wouldn't it be lovely if Kitty's visit tomorrow was also reflected in her overall health record, because it has a direct impact on her overall health. That is what we call real integration of oral health, behavioral health into overall health. We feel very strongly, and I'm positive most of you will agree, that your head should be put back on your body with how you are treated. We think that makes sense. So there's an awful lot of good work to be done, and there are lots of studies going on. There are some deadlines coming up that will inform how quickly people are moved into these new care systems of care, and we want to make sure that the patient experience and patient-reported outcomes are valued. That's a radical shift in how we pay for and value the services that we as consumers receive. It also means we have to be well-informed and engaged. And there are some mechanisms in the system that allow you to be more participatory in your care. There are things called Patient and Family Advisory Councils. I would love to know if anybody here is a member of a PFAC. I highly recommend them. That each hospital in Massachusetts or rehabilitation facility in Massachusetts is required by law to have a Patient and Family Advisory Council. And we think that these are opportunities for patients and families to have their voices and their experiences reflected within the leadership of hospitals. Tomorrow, Healthcare for All is convening our 4th annual PFAC conference. These really are wonderful opportunities to help inform our healthcare institutions about what the needs of the communities are, what the needs of the patients really are, and we think that these hold great promise for, again, injecting patient experience into the healthcare system. And one of the victories that Healthcare for All had with the Mass Health waiver and with the new systems that are coming in place is all ACOs in Massachusetts, all ACOs, will be required to have a Patient and Family Advisory Council. So there's still lots of opportunities for you to get involved in these new structures. And Healthcare for All will be helpful. We will be engaged with the volunteers and the consumer representatives who get on these councils, because we think it's vitally important for change. So thank you.
Thank you. Don't be nervous. I have written remarks because I never know what I think until I write it down, which is of course a lie. But I also note that I am sitting between a past and present director of Healthcare for All. And I remember some things you said, John, and I bet I'd like to eat them, but we'll get to that later. Anyhow, and this is only 10 minutes, I timed it, so. And I am going to use just a couple of my minutes to say a word about our moderator. Michael Dukakis and I go back some 50 years, and I was a young liberal advocate, and he was an equally young state representative from Brookline. Now, actually, I have a year or two on him, but we were close. In any case, we worked together on such diverse issues as civil service reform, in which practically no one is interested anymore, and low-income housing, which has not, unfortunately, been resolved. But more importantly to me, Michael took me aside and took the time to show me how to ferret out the real decision points in the legislative process, as opposed to the final votes, which often fail to separate the sheep from the goats. Later on, I ran for and was elected to the Democratic State Committee when Michael recruited me to be part of his efforts to strengthen the grassroots of the Democratic Party. As many of you may know, Michael is one of the strongest fans of organizing at the local level for local office or President of the United States as well. And he hasn't changed about that a bit, as the presumptive nominee of the Democratic Party will soon find out, if she doesn't already know, will be on her case. I was a delegate to maybe 2 or 3 state conventions, supporting Michael, and later in Atlanta when he was nominated for the presidency. I worked directly for him during his first and third term, skipping the second, the only one that had any money to spare, showing my lack of judgment. And have kept in touch with him in the years since he left public office. As you know, Michael is a great keep-in-touch kind of a guy. Many politicians have loyal, even passionate supporters who will follow their leader wherever and whenever he asks them to go, and to do whatever it is he asks them to do. Michael's supporters are a little bit different. They, we, I, support the agendas that he set out for us, not just for the content of the issues, but for the quality of the process. Do your homework, know your facts, work hard, but get a life if you don't already have one. And that's very important. It was very important to every woman who worked for him. And above all else, earn the public trust each and every day by demanding the highest standards of honesty, integrity, and respect for the office you hold and the honor it is to hold it. When I began my tenure at the GIC 30 years ago this July, after 7 or 8 years in the private sector, after Michael had the bad grace to lose his bid for a second term, the then re-elected Governor Dukakis urged me to go out there and get my arms around the healthcare monster. Clearly, I did not succeed, although God knows I gave it my best shot, infuriating the Hospital Association and the Mass Medical Society in the process, of which I am rather proud. We tried every utilization management and cost containment idea in the books, from pharmacy and mental health carve-outs, mail-order drugs, physician performance evaluation, tiered copays, limited networks, and most recently mandating plans to stay within a budget or face financial penalties, and simultaneously pushing hospitals and physicians to accept financial risks as well. They may believe in it for businesses, but they don't believe in it for themselves, and it's been a hard push, let me tell you. All of those techniques, I might say, did work to a degree. They did keep the GIC's increases lower than those of most other employers. But that price juggernaut always kept a step ahead of us. When I came to the GIC, the average premium was $173 a month. That was full cost, mind you. Our budget was $250 million. Today's premium is $885. These are averages, by the way. And the GIC's budget passed the $2 billion mark a couple of years ago. The cost of insuring significantly more people is part of that increase, to be sure, but insuring the state's workforce and its retirees has actually doubled as a percentage of the state's budget. Along with pensions, healthcare costs for most municipalities, as I'm sure you know, is a constant threat to their fiscal stability. That is why the legislature authorized a process that enabled cities and towns like Brookline to cast their lot with the GIC with our much larger risk pool and our ability to negotiate rates directly with health plans. It's not perfect, but it helps. And as most of you know, your own town manager, Mel Kleckner, who was back there somewhere, but he escaped before I had a chance to say something nice about him. So would you please tell him I said something? Will you tell him I said something nice about him? He represents municipal managers on the commission, which he does with diligence, fairness, and good judgment, and it's been a pleasure to work with him. 2 techniques we did not adopt are, first of all, one that many other employers have embraced and which we are under constant pressure to agree to. First, called consumer-driven health plans, a deliberate misnomer in my own view. Now more honestly renamed what they really are, which is high-deductible health plans. And those plans basically shift cost increases to the patients and encourage employees to be underinsured. They trade lower premiums for greater risk should serious illness strike them or their families. So in addition, really, you're paying your premium and you are also essentially not insured until you get paid deductible as well. It's a bad bargain, in my view, unless you happen to be rich, which is nice for you, but if you happen not to be rich, it's not so nice for you. The second step that more and more employers have taken, that I have also, or we have also, oh God, it's not me anymore, that the GIC has refused to do, is to stop covering retirees at all, leaving Medicare to take care of those people's medical needs. In both scenarios, in my view, the employer community has, in essence, thrown workers and retirees under the bus as a means for dealing with the cost of medical care, and has failed to restrain the industry from their pricing, advertising, and utilization practices that drag down the entire economy and are literally starving other social needs as well. And that includes, most dramatically, public health. If you look at a graph showing, we weren't allowed to have slides, which I don't like anyhow, but there's a wonderful, not wonderful, an awful graph, slide that shows that healthcare costs are like this and public health costs are below the table. Not their costs, not their needs, but their appropriations. So that's what you're paying for. You're paying for medical care instead of preventive care and instead of public health. At the same time period, price disparities have steadily worsened in the wake of mergers, acquisitions, consolidations, and the growing dominance of academic medical centers as the locus of more and more care delivery, while community hospitals are struggling to survive and many have already succumbed. So for just a few comments about the future, as I see it, before we go on to the Q&A, I've been hearing for the past 30 years that healthcare costs are unsustainable and something has to be done about it. What I have not heard, except for a few brave or maybe foolish people, are any serious commitment to do what needs to be done instead of relying on what Judy called tinkering around the edges and what I call rescue fantasies that tap on the brakes and that's all they do. But they don't stop the price juggernaut. Expanding access to the Mass Connector Authority, and John was extraordinarily instrumental in that endeavor, even though he did occasionally say we should do access first and worry about cost later, but you'll have your chance to rebut that if you want to. Yeah, right. And then through Obamacare, where he was equally instrumental. And they were wonderful and long overdue achievements. Hey, I was present at the creation of the Connector Authority and sat on its board until I retired. And it's a wonderful endeavor, and we should, as Judy and Amy both said, be very, very proud of it. But fighting for better health care quality and safety and for cost control is even harder. Machiavelli pointed out, I think, 500 years ago, that those who benefit from today's arrangements are organized and they will fight to the death to keep a system that rewards them, while those who could benefit from new arrangements are not as well organized and may not even know how much better off they would be if the system were changed. So we get the kind of thing that, a couple of examples of what I mean, I'm not just making that up. Medicare is just considering a pilot test to see if reference pricing for drugs, where there are multiple drugs in the same therapeutic category, if they could select a benchmark price and say that's what Medicare will pay for anything in that therapeutic category. Well, it was met with screams of anguish from pharma and the American Enterprise Institute and the Republican Congress, and I am sorry to say, some Democrats as well. Or the biotech innovation leadership, and we're all supposed to demonstrate that biotech is the savior of the world. They've just established a new program to fight any and all attempts to rein in the obscene price increases on existing drugs. I'm not talking even about new drugs, as well as new ones, or closer to home. And either of these gentlemen is in the room, I'm sorry, but too bad. A Harvard Medical School professor and an MIT economist who have seriously proposed that banks could mortgage the upfront costs of specialty drugs and patients could pay it back over time, including interest, of course. It sort of reminds you of what the banks and real estate guys did with putting together poor mortgages and calling them financial instruments and then selling them. And they came close to causing another major depression in this country. Or the merger and acquisitioning of hospitals and healthcare companies, driving out the smaller institutions, somewhat like the robber barons of the 19th century, buying up railroad lines and then telling farmers they'd have to pay higher prices to get their products to the market. And probably because these institutions have our husbands, our wives, our parents, our children as hostages to fortune, the outrage that does surface is directed not to the providers and their prices, but to the evil insurance companies, a convenient scapegoat if ever there was one. Folks, we have found the enemy, and it is us. Too many of us, not in this room I suspect, but too many of us in this country have drunk the anti-tax Kool-Aid. We have not demanded that our leaders lead. We have blamed the victims and not the perpetrators, and we have let the medical industrial complex get totally out of control in the name of two things, the great choice and the belief that the market can solve everything. We have given that market 50 years at least to see what it can do, and it has failed that test. It's time to use that instrument called government to set the rules of the game, to protect the public for the common good, in short, to harness the wonderful advances in scientific knowledge and skill for the benefit of the public in a way that is humane, rational, and affordable. So my fellow panelists know as much, if not more, than I do about all this, so I look forward to the question period. Thank you.
I think I took the wrong seat. So hi everybody, I'm John McDonough. I've been a resident of Brookline for 18 years, so I'm quite pretty close. Congratulations to Jack and to Alan for this forum, and regards to my fellow panelists, and of course to Governor Dukakis for your terrific service. I thought we were coming here to talk about the North-South Railway. But so since we're talking about health, I thought what I would talk about a little bit is something, you may find this a little boring, but talk about the politics of healthcare this year as it relates to Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton and Republicans and Democrats in Congress, because this is actually a pretty important period that we're in right now, and I thought I would sort of, in the interests of sort of the standards of this, to try to look forward and talk a little bit about what's at stake right now. So you all know that the Affordable Care Act passed just about 6 years and 3 months ago. It was the largest and most important health law since the passage of Medicare and Medicaid in 1965, signed by President Lyndon Johnson. But we could argue all night which was more important. They were both of monumental importance to the health and well-being of American society. I think we could say that both of them, the 1965 law and the 2010 law, neither of them went as far and as much as many people would have liked. And there are so many ways to improve it. And I think it's also important to recognize that the 1965 law and the 2010 law went about as far as was possible in the context of the times in which it was passed. We could wish it would have gone further and nod and agree on that, and still have to accept the reality that we made significant progress, not as much as we would like, and there's more work to be done. There is an argument to be made, an argument to be had, and perhaps we'll have it here. Are we better off with the ACA and then trying to build on that and move forward, which was clearly the process that happened in 1965. If you look at the 1965 law that created Medicare and Medicaid, you could barely recognize Medicare or Medicaid today based upon what was passed in 1965. The 1965 law that created Medicaid. Medicaid was kind of the caboose on the long train that created Medicare. The original Medicaid program was designed to provide health insurance only for mothers and children on public assistance, then called AFDC, Aid to Families with Dependent Children, now called TANF, or whatever it's called today. What's that?
Transitional assistance for needy
No, what?
families.
Yeah, but it's still TANF,
Yeah.
right, yeah. And it's gone in today. Medicaid is the largest health insurance program in the United States, covering now about 72 million Americans. Medicare, which was the big kahuna in 1965, today covers about 55 million Americans, and it is also of monumental importance. It has changed in so many, many ways. The original law, until 2006, did not provide any coverage, for example, for outpatient prescription drugs. And that's only one of many examples. So I would say my premise would be that we are better off having the ACA and moving forward and building and going way beyond as much as we can, as much as the political windows of opportunity permit. So where are we today? So today we have, for the most part, not 100%, but for the most part, the ACA has pretty much been implemented. What we have achieved is we've gotten about 24, 25 million Americans who didn't have health insurance now have it. We still have uninsured, somewhere between 27 and 30 million Americans don't have it. There are lots of things that we can do without having to write a new law to get that number significantly down. Hillary Clinton has a lot of ideas for things that she would like to do. But it is an important achievement to have gotten health coverage up by somewhere between 20 to 25 million. We have not absolutely, and I know Dolores and everybody on the panel would agree, we haven't solved the cost problem. We have, however, seen significant progress over the past 6 years in a way that most people just don't believe. With good reason, because people look at how healthcare costs go up relative to their own case. But there's a study that just came out yesterday from the Urban Institute and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And it said that if healthcare costs had actually gone up over the past 6 years at the rate that we expected them to go up back in 2010, that we as a society would have spent over those 6 years $2.6 trillion more than we did on healthcare costs. So now that doesn't make people a lot happy, but it is in fact factually correct. We have actually, since 2010, had the lowest rate of increase in healthcare spending as a nation since we started counting these numbers back in the 1960s. So we have seen progress, and we haven't seen enough. So we have also seen over the course of the past 6 years a series of what I call existential threats or near-death experiences to the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, whichever you prefer to call it, I don't care. Either one is fine with me. But we've had, for example, 2 monumental cases before the United States Supreme Court. We've seen the House of Representatives more than 60 times vote to repeal the law. We have seen the website catastrophe in the fall of 2013 with people wondering, could the law survive? It's been a rocky road. And we are, for the most part, over the implementation hump. But we have one existential threat left. There's one more chance where what has been achieved could be blown away. And it's around the corner. It's coming up on November 8th of this year. and it is the federal elections. And so let me present to you what I think are the two most potentially possible scenarios for how we will look at what happened on November 9th. I hope that's not. So scenario A is that we, on November 9th, are looking to January, and we believe and we know from the election results that we will have a Republican-controlled White House and a Republican-controlled Senate and House. A very real possibility. If Donald Trump wins the White House, it seems to me inconceivable that Republicans would lose control of the Senate. So that would be scenario A. And then scenario B is that the Democrats win control of the White House through Hillary Clinton, and we still have a Republican House and Senate, but more likely we have a Democratic Senate and a Republican-controlled House. The possibility of Democrats getting the White House, the Senate, and the House are significantly remote, mostly when it comes to the House of Representatives, for a lot of reasons that we don't have time to get into. But odds are, if Democrats win the White House, they will also win back the Senate, at least for 2017 and 2018. So two scenarios. I think it's fair to say, I don't think that healthcare is going to be a significant and crucial issue in terms of how or whether, what way people cast their votes on November 8th. I don't think that it is that high. It's there. It's one of the issues that people think about, but there's enough confusion out there at this point, and Americans are still so divided around the ACA that it's not going to have the crucial impact. At the same time, I think it's absolutely the case with near complete certainty that the results of the election will have a fundamental impact on the future of healthcare and healthcare policy in the United States. So two ways, two scenarios, what's likely to happen. So scenario A is Republicans control the White House and the Senate and the House of Representatives. I think it is more than likely that in January that the new Republican Congress and White House move forward and use an obscure process in the United States that most people don't understand called budget reconciliation. And under the budget reconciliation process, they can move legislation through the Senate with only 51 votes. They don't need this 60-vote threshold that you're probably seeing this week around the gun issue. Only 51 votes, and no filibusters allowed. And so if that happens, I would expect that Republicans will move legislation that significantly dismantles most of the coverage expansions in the Affordable Care Act. The expansions of private coverage through these health insurance exchanges, marketplaces, and the Medicaid expansions in most states. There will be a serious effort. Donald Trump's health agenda, to the extent that it's there, was evaluated by a very reputable group in DC called the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. Their estimate was that Donald Trump's health plan would result by 2018 in about 21 million Americans losing the health insurance coverage that they have today. Today, the Republican leadership of the House of Representatives, Paul Ryan and his healthcare task force, put out their own agenda on health reform, what they would like to do. And it has a lot of differences and similarities, but the bottom line is roughly the same. There is a determination and a will to try and dismantle the Affordable Care Act as much as they can, and they're particularly focused on the coverage expansions. So a fundamental difference. Very interesting, and you know, we talk about the numbers, we talk about the data, we talk about facts, we talk about anecdotes and stuff. Fundamentally, and more than I've seen since I've been in public life, and I think probably, going back to way long ago, Michael remembers more than I do, there's really a conflict of values at stake right now in terms of healthcare. And the value conflict is this. One of the things that Paul Ryan said today is he would like to condition Medicaid so that the only people who can get Medicaid, if you're adults, you can only get it if you have a job. So if you're poor and you can't get a job, you shouldn't be able to get Medicaid because it's then a disincentive for you to go and get a job. This is what he said. I'm not making this up. You can look at his plan and see it. And Democrats have a very different view. Whether you like Obamacare or not, whether it goes too far, whether it doesn't go far enough. But there is a common value, I think, that energizes the Democratic perspective, which is that health care should be seen and recognized as a human right. That you shouldn't have to meet somebody's idea of who's deserving and who's not to be able to get access to medically necessary services to restore health or to keep you healthy. And that's a fundamental difference. So now, can they get away with it? There is some doubt. It depends upon how strong their majority is in the Senate. It's not a sure thing. I think what's a sure thing is that there will be a serious effort after 6 years of promising to repeal Obamacare and get rid of this monstrosity. If they actually had all 3 White House, Senate, and House, I can't believe that they would betray their base in that way, because the base of Republicans is so strongly motivated to want to eliminate this monstrosity. So let's say that the Democrats hold the White House and get the Senate. Are we likely to see anything happen? So what's different is that over the last 6 years, for the most part, the stance of the Obama White House has been, listen, we know there are problems with the ACA, but we've got to get it implemented. We can't get distracted into side debates about how to make it better or expand it at this point, and we have to hold on for dear life to protect what we've gained. And that's what it's been. I think with Hillary Clinton, and again, you can go to her website and you can see what she is proposing. She's ready to, and she has already begun to articulate and formulate an agenda to advance beyond the ACA. Not as far, not as dramatic as many people would like. She is not advocating a single-payer healthcare system because she doesn't believe it is politically viable at this point. But she is attempting to address many of the significant gaps in the Affordable Care Act. She's also proposing that adults between ages 50 and 64 should be able to pay and enroll in the Medicare program early, if that is their chosen path. She would like to see states take up something that was debated during the ACA process called the public option, where these state exchanges would have a government-run health plan as one of the choices among them. She would like to try to work to make that happen. She wants to take on the pharmaceutical industry in terms of the disgraceful pricing practices that we've seen with some of these high-cost medicines, and a bunch of other stuff. Now, odds are it's the White House and the Senate and not the House. And so it's not like 2009 and 2010, President Obama's first 2 years when he had Democratic unity in control. And so there'd have to be a lot of negotiation with the Republican Senate. What is the likelihood of something happening? Well, part of the problem over the past, one thing that people don't understand is that in fact, there have been a bunch of changes to Obamacare over the past 6 years that have actually gone through Congress, got to the president's desk, and got signed. The tally that I think is probably the most useful is about 24 times. Over the last 6 years, Congress has gone in, changed, repealed, delayed, something in Obamacare. So it's happened, but it's all been stuff for the most part that was initiated by the Republican side, and Democrats didn't really have an agenda except to hold back, preventing the really bad stuff that they tried to do. I think what we will see that's different is in next year is the articulation for the first time since the passage of the law of a democratic agenda of improvements to make the law better, strengthen, and improve it. That's no guarantee of success, particularly, because we've been in this now since about 2008, this game of seesaw politically. In the presidential election year, lots of people come out and Democrats do really well. And in the non-election year, the midterm, very few people come out and Republicans do very well. So even if Democrats take back the Senate in January, the likelihood is that they'll lose it again in 2018. And we go back and forth. So it's dicey, there's nothing sure, there's nothing guaranteed, but there will be opportunities. So it's a very stark choice that we're on the precipice of in November 8th regarding health reform. We were either going to go into a period where we're facing some very stark challenges and changes to the law, very much in the wrong direction, or we begin to see an agenda to push forward and try to improve it. We can make judgments and guesses about how it's going to turn out, but it's a long way between now and November 8th. So very important, if you feel motivated about this, to be part of the conversation and keep going.
Thank you all very much, and thanks for the kind words. I appreciate them. There is a third scenario, John, which we saw in 2005 and 2006. Who remembers that one? Well, we had a national Democratic chairman named Howard Dean, who had been the governor of Vermont, and who announced when he was elected the National Party chairman that he was going to be running a 50-state campaign. The Democratic Party has not run very many 50-state campaigns. In fact, we kind of kissed off half the country, even before we began. Well, my friend Dean and I have been talking about this for the last 3 months, and I think we have gotten the Democratic presumptive nominee committed very strongly to the notion that this is not going to be reds and blues and purples. This is going to be a 50-state campaign with a state director in every one of the 50 states, and with, I hope, a 200,000 precinct campaign. Every precinct in the country, with a precinct captain and block captains doing what? Making personal contact with every single voting household. If we do that, John, it's conceivable, maybe not likely, but conceivable, but we'll never know unless we try. And some of you may recall that when Dean was elected in 2005, a fellow named Rahm Emanuel, remember him? Got very upset and got into a public argument with Dean saying, this is ridiculous, why are we giving money as Democrats to the Wyoming Democratic Party? This is all about 16 seats in the Congress, and that's what this should be all about, and so on and so on and so forth. To his credit, Dean responded by saying, I said this was going to be a 50-state campaign, and it's going to be a 50-state campaign. And it was, and the Democrats took over the Congress. Something to think about as we approach the fateful day of the 8th of November. And I hope and expect that we'll have an announcement soon from the Clinton campaign asking 200,000 people to step up and run precincts. And we ought to be able to do that. So we'll see. We'll see. I think John's analysis is probably closer to where we are now, but we'll see whether it's possible for the Democratic Party at least to run a 50-state campaign. Last time we did it, we won. Maybe we can do it again. Okay, we've got a pretty good chunk of time for you guys, and this has never been a shy audience. So who wants to begin? And you can direct your question to a particular member of the panel, or you can, we've got a mic up here, and the person handling it happens to be one of my best students at Northeast University. And with some advice from me, was elected to the town meeting decisively when she ran.
Unfortunately, Bernie Sanders was never mentioned. However, he did activate the youth of this country. Are you telling me that the Democrats and the Republicans are not going to listen to what they want or what they need? It's not in our hands anymore. We're over the hill. It's the new generation. Back to the 60s.
Somebody want to comment on that? We're all too old.
We're energized. Okay.
Look, I don't want to dampen your enthusiasm at all. I strongly support a single payer system if we can get it through the Congress. Just remember that Vermont tried it. Sanders is from Vermont, and they failed. They failed. They failed to get a single payer system in Vermont, of all places.
They tried.
Didn't do it. I don't want to say anything more about Sanders. If Kitty were here, she'd tell you that he endorsed Jackson over her husband for president. Women never forget. Yeah, go ahead. Is that thing on? Chris? Yeah.
I think the unmentionable one, who will likely not be in the White House, regardless of which party wins, has argued honestly and passionately and with great consistency that the only real cure for the healthcare ills of this country is a single-payer system. It wasn't his fault that Vermont didn't do it. I think it takes probably a countrywide conviction, which is what happened in Canada when all the provinces eventually came around to it. But rather than being
But it started with a single province, right?
Okay. But rather than being a scapegoat, I think Bernie would argue that the insurance companies are part of the greedy forces whose lust for profits offer a disincentive to really good health care for everyone. And for his trouble, Bernie, the people who disagreed with Senator Sanders have argued not so much that he's wrong, but that his arithmetic doesn't make sense, which may be what the Vermont government found or felt was the case. And that a single-payer system would cost too much, it couldn't be implemented. Now, I know, Governor Dukakis, you have become, in recent years, an advocate of single-payer, and I wonder what you think about the economic reality of such a system.
I'd rather flip it to the panel before I comment, because they all have thoughts about this. You'll get them, believe me. Any thoughts about, Dolores, you had some comments about the insurance industry, which I thought was kind of interesting, and you've never been known as somebody who's tender for the insurance.
I have no particular wild enthusiasm for the insurance companies, but I think it is a waste of time to beat up on them as though no one else was in this game. Hospitals that are building empires across state lines and becoming national organizations, hospitals that are for-profit and buy up smaller hospitals and then cut staff and cut services, physician organizations which are also becoming multi-state, device manufacturers who I put in maybe a little less self-esteem in my part than the pharmaceutical industry. If we were to do just two things, go back to the future, go back to pre-1995 or 6, somewhere in there, when the Federal Drug Administration prohibited the advertising of pharmaceutical products, we could save $1. I believe that there's only one other industrialized country in the world that allows advertising of pharmaceuticals. So there are lots of big New Zealand, yeah. There are a lot, and then we have sheep and I don't know, then hobbits, okay. So, I mean, that's one thing. Changing a patent clause is another. So you don't have these games that they play to extend the patents on things because they change the color of the pill, even though the contents are identical. There are lots of things that we could do that would make healthcare affordable, whether it's under a single system or a multi-organizational system. Health insurance companies, remember, include places like Harvard Pilgrim, like Tufts Health Plan. They are insurance companies. Don't paint them all with the same brush. Yeah, they make too much money, but so do a lot of other people. And at the same time, I have found some of them to be helpful. I have a feeling about some of them, they're kind of like the little Dutch boy that stuck his finger in the dike to keep the water from coming over. Sometimes they're all that stand between the purchaser and the deluge. Their job is not, and remember one other thing, a huge chunk of the people in this country have health insurance policies that are called insurance, but they really aren't insurance. What they are, they're self-insured by the employer. The insurance company does not make a nickel on saying no. They are paid for processing claims. So a lot of us, right here in Massachusetts, Judy, correct me if I'm wrong on that, it's over 50% are self-insured. The Group Insurance Commission that I'm talking, we are self-insured. That means that insurance company sets the premium, or we negotiate a premium. If more money is spent by the patients and the hospitals, guess what? They are not up for that money. They're not at risk for that money. I have to go back to the legislature with my little tin cup in my hand and say, sorry, I spent my entire appropriation. Please give me some more money. A lot of Americans are in that kind of situation. It's not just the insurance company. Be mad at them if you want, but they are not the only perpetrators.
Any other comments? Julianne?
Yeah, I'd like to just talk about single payer as a mechanism to improve our health system. And I think that there's a difference between how we pay for the health care and who pays for it. And you can move from having all these multiple players to a single payer. But if they're still paying for the same thing our healthcare system represents, we will have made perhaps some progress, but we won't address the fundamental issue. And, you know, I think if we think about some of the changes that have been mentioned here that are on the horizon. So for example, if everyone gets put in an ACO, if the Mass Health program is successful in creating a Medicaid ACO where hospitals are the locus of the system, is that system really the best way to design a system where health is the ultimate outcome and where most people actually never even end up in a hospital? If you look at the distribution of where care is delivered, a huge percentage of it is outside of the hospital, and those are the places where people can engage in health promoting activities, where they can be kept well instead of taking care of them when they do get sick. And the issues related to mental health, children's behavioral problems, those types of things are not hospital-based problems. So if you have a single payer, but you don't change the healthcare system and the focus of what it's doing, I'm not sure you're going to achieve the results you want to.
I don't think the issue is this, and I agree with you.
Any other comments on this? Look, I think what happened in Vermont is instructive. Whatever you think of Bernie Sanders' role or lack of it, I don't know that Sanders was involved at all. You would think he would have been, but I don't know. There was a lot of optimism about Vermont moving ahead on this. And in point of fact, I think, John, the ACA was designed to make it possible for Vermont to move in that direction. And it was anticipated that some states wouldn't. Most people thought at least Vermont might. If I understand what happened there, when people began discovering that they would have to pay significantly more taxes to pay for this system, support seemed to disappear. And in fact, a rather popular Democratic governor barely was reelected on that issue. Now, don't ask me to explain this aversion to taxes, because somebody's paying. But the fact that employers pay a significant amount of this, which otherwise, as I understand the Vermont situation, would have been replaced by taxes, had a devastating effect on the popularity. And I think that's something we have to bear in mind. Remember also, there are multi-payer systems in this world, Germany being one, which provide excellent health care at about half the cost. How come? Because they regulate the hell out of the system. They don't indulge in this fantasy that the market, Dolores, can do it, because the market can't. It can't and it won't. And for reasons I don't understand, folks, when it comes to regulating health costs, Americans, or at least a lot of Americans, get very nervous. We had something when I was governor called the State Rate Setting Commission. It wasn't original with me. I think it came out of the Sargent administration, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was Republican administration. And we treated the hospitals, at least, the way we treat public utilities. They couldn't raise their rates a nickel unless they got the approval of the Rate Setting Commission. It wasn't fun and games, it wasn't pleasant. Somebody once said, this kind of a process is inherently contentious. Happened to be a Canadian health economist.
How do other countries do it? Why don't we have models like Italy, the United Kingdom, the Arabs have it? Why aren't we looking at them and asking the question, how do they do it?
Canada.
Canada. Yeah.
All the Tories went to Canada. That's what happened during the revolution. And they're much more comfortable with government than we are. I'm serious. I'm serious. All the Tories went to Canada. They are much less troubled by a government role. But I will tell you this, and this is the last I'm going to say. Unless we get serious about regulating health costs and treating health care, you're pardon my saying so, as a public utility, I don't think it will solve the problem. With all due respect to, first it was HMOs and it was ACOs and so on and so forth. While at the same time, maybe we're getting, as Dolores pointed out, this incredible rash of consolidations and increasing concentration in the industry, both insurance company mergers, which isn't going to help anybody, and hospital mergers. Federal Trade Commission just lost a case in court seeking to stop the merger of two big health care systems in Chicago, I think, right? If this continues, folks, and if we have fewer and fewer hospital systems and fewer insurance companies, you're going to see price increases. And look, Partners provides very good care. I mean, I'm a fan, but let me tell you, the decision to permit that merger was a huge mistake. I can tell you this, if the Brigham and the Mass General had come to me and to Phil Johnson, my Secretary of Health and Human Services, when I was governor, and said, we want to merge, we'd have laughed them out of the office.
I
serious.
testified against it, the Attorney General paid no attention to me, and
I understand. And it was-
I won't mention which one it was.
I know who it was. So, and he was a Democrat. So, we better make sure that we understand what's happening currently in the healthcare industry. It's not good.
Michael, I want to say something
Dolores.
about taxes, though. And you're mentioning that Vermont foundered on the question of taxes. I spoke before a group of firefighters about a year not the friendliest audience in the world, and were accusing me of all kinds of bad things and whatever. And I said to them, I have news for you. I'll bet half of the people in this room voted against tax increases. Let you in on a little secret. You are paying more in taxes. They are called healthcare premiums. And when I talk about leaders needing to lead, I think they need to make that argument explicit over and over and over again. Because it's not tax-free. We are not tax-free. We are paying for it in other ways. We are paying for it not only in healthcare premiums, we're paying for it in crime. We're paying for it in kids whose mothers have to keep them at home after school because the playground has no supervisor and they're scared to death to let them go out alone. We are paying for it in the fact that there are no after-school sports. What does health have to do? Judy Ann mentioned this in her remarks. There are all these other things that have as much to do and as much influence on what we call health as is medical services. And we are starving those other services by spending it all on health, on medical care. Medical care is...
Trump wars and drones. I mean, you know, those are where our taxes are going. Why don't you talk about that?
I'm sorry, I missed your Bernard.
You're talking about where in practically every country we have bases. We are using drones. Why don't you talk about those things that are draining our taxes?
You want to add them to the list? Add them to the list.
There's a long list.
I'm with you, okay? I'm just trying to connect North and South Station, by the way. We're gonna be spending, are you ready for this, folks? We're gonna be spending $300 billion on a new supersonic bomb. Okay? 100 planes for $300 billion. To do what? Against whom? What the hell is this all about? And now, we're informed the Pentagon wants to spend trillions to modernize our nuclear arsenal. I thought we were trying to get rid of nuclear weapons. So you're right. I mean, we've got to start focusing on that. And by the way, our friend Mr. Ryan wants to increase the defense budget. He doesn't think we're spending enough. Keep your eye on that, folks, because it's, I think, appalling. And I just want a couple of billion for the North-South Rail. Much of which will pay for itself. Okay, yes, go ahead.
One of the elephants in the room is the lack of us producing enough primary care physicians. And at least in Brookline, many of them are associated with hospitals and they become conflicted. They can't, if I'm a Beth Israel practice, they're unreluctant to recommend the best doctor in Brighams and everything else. The supply side is the elephant in the room. How are we going to, with 21 million new people or potential new people, get enough primary care physicians who have the time and the effort to go beyond the 7 or 8 minute time slice that many of us are facing now? It appears we don't seem to be worrying about the supply side and the pressure on doctors to become specialists. With the panel length of comment.
Judy Ann, you're the doctor in the house.
Well, and I'm sure Amy has something to say about this as well. You're absolutely right, and our system encourages physicians to go into specialties, especially what's called the road specialties: radiology, anesthesiology, ophthalmology, and dermatology, because their lifestyle is pretty good and they earn a lot of money.
They all have Greek roots.
And because of the way we pay doctors now, if you think about it, the only thing primary care doctors have to sell, the only thing they have, is 15-minute appointments. So if they're told they need to get up their revenue, what can they do? They can see people in 12 minutes and then within 8 minutes. So you're absolutely right. This is why we need one of the reforms and redesigns that I absolutely support is to simply pay primary care physicians to take care of people as opposed to how many appointments they see. And if they need a half hour with one person and 5 minutes with the next, they should be able to do that without worrying about what their revenue looks like for the system that they're working in. The issue about physicians becoming hospital employees, and I was one for a very long time, and because of my seniority, I could kind of arrange my schedule the way I thought was appropriate. I think could be a blessing, but it could also be a challenge if we want to really attract more people into primary care and reform the way we think about the way they see patients. There are things that are being done, such as paying back student loan for those who elect to go into primary care. That was a strategy that became part of the effort that Governor Patrick initiated, and we were able to get more people to come into Massachusetts, both nurses and doctors, to practice primary care. But what you're describing is part of the upside down incentives that we have in our healthcare system, and that does need to change as well.
Affordable Care Act actually included about, John, check me, $1 billion to expand the National Health Corps and make it possible. And triple the size of the National Health Corps, and in effect, see if we can attract some young doctors, medical students coming out to do primary care by, I think, gradually paying off their student loans as an incentive to do so. Look, we know how to do this, folks. It's a question of whether or not we want to do it. Who's next?
Governor, can I
Oh,
just-
sorry, Amy,
No,
yeah.
I would just like to add that there is an opportunity for hope, and some of the good news of accountable care organizations does place primary care closer to the center of a care team. So the expectation is that if you have a global budget and you are being incentivized to keep your patient well, you need to have some sort of relationship with that patient and understand what he or she is facing, both in your office and outside your office. And because it's a global budget, the number of patients that you see, the amount of time that you spend really can be tailored to the relationship and the needs of that particular patient. So we are cautiously optimistic about that. We want to pay attention to the fact that that's a significant shift, and in that shift, one of the things that we are looking for is something called shared decision-making, which means that figuring out what your treatment protocol is actually based on a conversation that you'll have with your provider. That takes an extreme amount of time, particularly if you're facing a serious illness or a series of illnesses that need to be addressed. The other thing is that, one of the joys of Healthcare for All is being able to work with medical students. The people who are in medical school now want to have more time with their patients. They really do want to practice differently. And we're encouraged by the number of people who are saying and affirming the fact that they want to be internists and primary care and family physicians. It's beholden to all of us to make sure that the system that they come into is one that fosters and maintains that level of enthusiasm and engagement.
Amy, what's a global budget?
One other thing on that.
Hold on. No,
That's right. The global budget is a per member per month payment that is made regardless of your health status or of your health status and what's needed. And in extremes, ACOs can actually spend that money that's based on your membership that you've paid in on things that are outside, beyond the medical system. So, we have the Commonwealth Care Alliance has been practicing within global budgets and pays for things like air conditioners for folks who are asthmatic, and that keeps people out of the hospital. It's what they need, or a new mattress. There are ways to pay for, in theory, transportation can be part of what you're spending can go toward. Again, that's what's needed to keep you healthy and as vital as possible. Medically tailored meals are marvelous. Well, we know you need nutrition, you need housing, you need transportation. It's not just access to a hospital.
There were some medically tailored meals served right in this room shortly before Christmas. You know that? My turkey soup. with donated carcasses from all over. Right here. Tomorrow.
I can't.
Concierge medicine.
Are you saying you had carcasses from Dukakis?
26 of them arrived on our front porch. And a 27th that some Greek guy from the North Shore sent me through the mail. We didn't use that one. So I froze 6 of them. My grandkids love turkey soup. We came over here and served, I don't know, 50 seniors for lunch. And we gave the rest to community service. They took care of about 2,000 people.
Michael, I want to just add one PS
Shoot.
to both Judy and Ann, and you said, and I agree with it, but I just want to emphasize one thing, and it's got a political PS on it. Team practice of internal medicine or primary care practice includes not just the physician, but the ancillary staff, particularly nurses. And the reason I want to mention that is there was in the last session of the legislature a bill which would have removed the restrictions that we have in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts about nurses being able to practice to the full extent of their licensure. And that bill got all the way through both houses and failed at the end of the session. Now, you can guess who might have been opposed to that bill. It was not the nurses.
And I don't know about, how many of you have been treated by a nurse practitioner? Good experience? Good experience, right?
How about a physician assistant?
Same deal, same deal. And I think, whether we like it or not, I think that we're gonna see more nurse practitioners and physician's assistants providing primary care. I mean,
Governor, can I add that you should know that pending in the legislature right now, there's a provision that would allow a similar mid-level practitioner for dentists. Their dental hygienists would be able to go to residential settings and provide good dental services, a mid-level dental practitioner. It's very exciting, and it's pending in the legislature now.
sounds good. Okay, who's next?
The
Who's
dentists
next?
are not that site.
Chris, you pick.
Okay, well, I'm happy to hear it.
John, my neighbor will have to get an ordinance with you.
That might be it.
My question is, I think most of the drugs, if we sell it to overseas, you can get it cheaper overseas. I mean, in other countries. That's why a lot of people.
For drugs?
Huh?
For drugs?
Yeah, drugs.
Yeah.
Drugs, DRGs.
Yeah.
You know, the thing is, I don't know, because I know the profit margin for all those manufacturers, the drug company is really high. And I don't know as a government, how can we stop, you know, kind of set a profit margin for the drug companies? Because America is a free country. And then, although we don't get free drugs, but then, you know, the problem is how do we set the profit margin for, you know, the highly profit for company.
Can we talk a little bit about drug pricing?
Yes.
Because all of you mentioned it.
I was just gonna say, it's been mentioned several times, and I will just start by saying, again, there's a bill pending in the legislature, we hope it will be passed in the Senate, that will provide at least some transparency about the drug pricing methods. We wanna hear what the cost of a drug is in other countries compared to what is being paid in the US. We wanna understand how much is being spent on marketing versus real bench science. And by the way, each of us has invested an awful lot of money already in the research that goes into some of these breakthrough medications by our funding of NIH, which is a marvelous investment. But we then don't reap it when drug manufacturers are allowed to price therapies seemingly whatever the market will bear. There are incredible cures that are coming down the pipe, but they are beyond the reach of many people, which is not okay. So at least we want to start with opening the black box of what the pricing mechanism is. And as I say, there is a bill in the legislature now. We have an awful lot more to do. I know Dolores mentioned, we've talked in other arenas about the impact of meals and gifts on physicians, when pharmaceutical representatives, even modest meals. We used to have a complete ban in Massachusetts. It was one of the exciting places where we were really in the vanguard of leading the rest of the country and shutting down these incentives for providers. Yesterday or sometime this week, there was a study that was released that even the modest meals, so $10 and $15 meals, impacts prescriber behavior. People are more likely to prescribe high-cost brand name prescription drugs if they've had modest meals from that particular company's representative. So there is a way to fix it. It's the largest, it's the fastest growing part of the healthcare pie right now, and it's impacting each of us directly.
Hold on, please, hold on.
Dividends to the stockholders.
Hold on, Dolores.
Let me read you something from the Boston Globe business section, which is getting better actually, over the years. Drug makers are not responding by cutting prices or even keeping them stable. Pfizer just hiked its drug prices by an average of nearly 9%. That's on top of a 10% hike just 6 months ago. Johnson & Johnson and Amgen have boosted the price of rheumatoid arthritis drugs by nearly 30% in the past year and a half. Biogen raised the cost of a multiple sclerosis drug by 18%. Overall, list prices for brand name medicine sold in the United States climbed more than 14% last year. Now, the guy who is the head of this thing called the Biotechnology Innovation Organization told the gathering at the conference last week, together we're going to fight back and we're going to win. You want to know who the enemy is, never mind about the insurance companies. These guys are ripe for picking, in my view.
I've been told that we have only time for one more question, and I'm going to take the prerogative of the moderator to recognize my dear neighbor, Dr. John Hertz. John. Is that on? Yeah, it's okay. All right.
What is Healthcare for All? What is the nature of the organization, number one? Is it a NGO or a lobbying group? What is it? What are you?
501c3 that provides education. We represent consumers in the legislature, so we do some direct lobbying. And then we also provide direct consumer assistance. We have a helpline. Anybody in Massachusetts can call. We'll help you navigate whatever problem you're having with the healthcare system, whatever glitch you've experienced. We pride ourselves on being the last call that you have to make, and we know that insurance and healthcare is very complicated. In return, we then figure out what trends there are in the healthcare system. It informs our lobbying. It's really a very remarkable organization that we have sister organizations around the country based on the work that we've been able to do in Massachusetts.
Sounds like you're very much in the game. Sounds like it.
If you guys want to fight against the drug companies, please come play with Healthcare for All. We are working very hard on this.
Great organization.
We welcome your work.
And it has a public interest law firm attached to it, counsel.
I've had the honor and privilege to work in the VA system for 45 years now, and none of these problems so are minimized. Kitty's dental records would be part of her medical record. Total care would be integrated. Patients are satisfied. Racial inequalities are minimal. Wonderful system. I don't know if it's a model for a single parent health system, but that's what it is. And I think it really, despite the fact that any mistake gets demagogued, in the press, it really is a wonderful system. My question is, teaching hospitals. And we not only teach medical students and residents, but nurses and PAs, nurse practitioners, physical therapists, pharmacists. Do they and most large urban safety net hospitals are indeed teaching hospitals. Are they a major contributor to the cost of healthcare in urban areas? And are there interventions that might moderate or modify these costs? Because you always hear it, we have to charge more because we teach and we train.
My own view on that, and it's not a new view in view of the more recent difficulties, is that there is no reason in God's green earth why medical education should be tied to the hospital. It should be its own funded appropriation in the federal budget. And we have linked these absurd. There is no logical reason why that should be, and it's one of the reasons why teaching hospitals are more expensive. I mean, you know, they've got lots of other reasons which are their fault, but this one isn't their fault. And yeah, it's part of the problem. It should never have happened. It should be changed. There are people who, I don't know anybody who's got riding that particular hobby horse, but one of these days it ought to happen.
Amy?
Well, I will just say, part of the antidote to what we hope part of the solution is having more transparency about outcomes for teaching hospitals as well as other hospitals. We have an awful lot of reporting requirements for outcomes that go to the Center for Health Information and Analysis, CHIA, which was set up as part of the 2012 law that I mentioned. We think that it's very important to be able to better understand where you're going to have the best health outcome, because right now, most of us substitute cost for outcomes. So if you pay more, you think that the care you get and receive will be better care. Without having information to the contrary, I don't think that we're going to be able to separate those two issues.
I think time has come to wrap things up, but I think maybe some of our guests are going to be willing to stick around and talk with you folks. So take advantage of that opportunity. Doctor, Alan, thank you once again. I guess we'll see you next year at about the same time. Right.